At 3 in the morning, a man lies awake staring at the ceiling, rehearsing an argument that ended 6 years ago. Another scrolls through a feed full of smiling faces, quietly convinced everyone else has learned how to live. A third feels nothing at all, just a slow, gray boredom spreading through his life like fog. These are not different problems, they are different human types, and Dostoevsky understood them with terrifying precision. But first, let me tell you why this matters more today than ever. 19th century Russia was not a calm place to think. It was a pressure cooker. Empires trembled, poverty was everywhere, faith was breaking apart, new political movements promised salvation, science promised certainty, and beneath it all, ordinary people were still trapped with the oldest problem in philosophy. What exactly is a human being when all the excuses are stripped away? Into that chaos walked Fyodor Dostoevsky, a man who didn't study human nature from a comfortable library chair. He studied it in prison cells, gambling halls, funeral rooms, and the wreckage of his own mind. He was arrested, sentenced to death, marched before a firing squad, and then pardoned at the last possible moment. Imagine what that does to your vision of life. Imagine what it teaches you about fear, vanity, pride, faith, resentment, and hope. Dostoevsky came back from that edge with a brutal insight. Human beings do not merely act rationally. We sabotage ourselves. We cling to suffering. We turn freedom into punishment. We crave love while pushing people away. We beg for meaning, then mock anyone who believes in it. In the language of modern philosophy, he was diagnosing the fractured self long before the modern world gave it clinical names. And what makes him so relevant now is this. The 5 human types hidden across his novels are not just literary characters. They are recurring structures of the soul. You've met them. You may live with one. You may be one. And unlike Stoic philosophy, which often teaches discipline through clarity, Dostoevsky forces you to look at the messy, contradictory parts of yourself you would rather not see. Here's the open loop by the end. One of these 5 types will probably make you deeply uncomfortable. Good. That discomfort may be the most honest thing you feel all day. The first type is the wounded egoist, the person who turns pain into identity. Dostoevsky gives us this type most famously in Notes from Underground, in the figure now known simply as the Underground Man. He is intelligent, hyper-aware, socially humiliated, and completely unable to act cleanly in the world. He overthinks every gesture until action becomes impossible. Then he turns his paralysis into a kind of superiority. He would rather fail on his own terms than risk a simple human life. And then Dostoevsky drops the knife. Man is sometimes extraordinarily, passionately in love with suffering. That line is not poetic exaggeration. It is diagnosis. You know this type, maybe too well. The person who says they want peace but keeps feeding the resentment that gives them an identity. The person who claims they want love but keeps choosing situations that confirm their unlovability. The person who says they are trapped by the world, when part of them is secretly attached to the trap, because at least the trap explains everything. This is where modern philosophy and self-improvement often become too shallow. They tell people to optimize, reframe, journal, hydrate, wake up earlier. Fine, sometimes helpful. But Dostoevsky asks a more dangerous question. What if you are not merely suffering? What if you are using suffering? What if misery has become your private kingdom? And here's where most people get it wrong. They think the opposite of despair is happiness. It isn't. The opposite of despair is responsibility. That's debatable, of course, and good. It should be, because some people will insist despair is caused by circumstances alone. But Dostoevsky saw that while circumstances wound us, we often collaborate with the wound. That's why the Underground Man feels so modern. He is the prototype of the hyper-conscious, online, self-narrating self. He is all commentary, no movement. He can explain his pain in exquisite detail, but cannot step beyond it. He doesn't lack intelligence. He lacks the courage to become simple. Stoic philosophy would tell this type to focus on what is in your control. Ancient wisdom would say discipline your judgments. Modern Stoicism would prescribe detachment from insult and appetite. Useful, but Dostoevsky adds something darker. Sometimes you don't want to be healed, because healing would force you to give up the identity built from grievance. But there's something even more shocking. The wounded egoist is not the worst type. The worst type may be the one who feels almost nothing at all. The second type is the deadened conformist, the person who trades soul for comfort. This is the human being who stops asking ultimate questions, not because they answered them, but because asking became inconvenient. They move through life functionally, efficiently, respectably, and inwardly something has gone silent. Dostoevsky saw this type in bureaucrats, careerists, social climbers, and anyone who accepts a dead life in exchange for predictability. In one of his most haunting lines, he wrote, "The mystery of human existence lies not in just staying alive, but in finding something to live for." That sentence cuts straight through the modern obsession with management. Staying alive is not enough. Paying bills is not enough. Looking stable is not enough. A life can be outwardly successful and inwardly evacuated. Now let me say something controversial. A huge portion of what passes for adulthood is just socially rewarded spiritual numbness. Get the job, keep busy, stay entertained, avoid silence, call it maturity. But if you never ask what your life is for, are you really living or just performing competence? That question should sting a little. This is where transformation begins. Because once you recognize deadness, you have a choice. You can keep decorating the cage, or you can start listening for the parts of you that still feel hunger. Hunger for truth, beauty, service, love, even God. If that language means something to you, and no, this does not mean quitting your job and moving to a cabin. Most people romanticize escape because it sounds noble. But Dostoevsky is less interested in dramatic reinvention than in inner resurrection. The real question is not whether your life looks impressive. It is whether your soul is awake inside it. So here's a practical application. Sit in silence for 10 minutes without any input. No music, no phone, no task. Just silence. Notice what rises first: anxiety, boredom, grief, anger, restlessness. That reaction is not a glitch. It's a map. It shows you exactly what your inner life has been trying to say beneath the noise. And this is where it gets interesting. Once people rediscover that inner hunger, they tend to split in two directions. Some become humble, others become proud. Which brings us to the third type, the most seductive of all. The third type is the proud idealist, the person who wants to save humanity but cannot love actual human beings. Dostoevsky returns to this type again and again. Brilliant men with grand systems, abstract compassion, and almost no tenderness. They love mankind in theory and despise people in practice. They want justice, but only on terms that preserve their superiority. They don't serve truth, they recruit it. If that sounds familiar, it should. This type thrives in every era: politics, academia, activism, corporate culture, even spirituality. They are intoxicated by ideas because ideas do not interrupt them the way living people do. A system is clean. A person is inconvenient. A theory can be controlled. A neighbor cannot. Dostoevsky's warning here is devastating. Intelligence without humility becomes cruelty wearing elegant clothes. And now the fourth type, the sensualist, the person who chases intensity because they cannot bear emptiness. This one is easier to recognize. Pleasure, risk, drama, lust. Gambling, status, intoxication, anything to feel alive for 5 minutes. Dostoevsky knew this type intimately because he carried parts of it himself. The sensualist is not always hedonistic in the obvious way. Sometimes they are addicted to chaos, to romantic turbulence, to emergencies, to emotional extremes. Peace feels too quiet, so they call chaos passion. This type often gets celebrated by modern culture because intensity is cinematic. It looks alive. But ask yourself, is intensity the same as depth? Is desire the same as meaning? Is being stimulated the same as being fulfilled? Ancient wisdom would answer no. Stoic philosophy would answer no. And Dostoevsky would answer with an even sharper no. If you need constant stimulation to escape yourself, then pleasure has become a form of imprisonment. Now we arrive at the fifth type, the one Dostoevsky holds up not as naive perfection, but as hard-won possibility. The compassionate sufferer, the person who has seen darkness, perhaps been shattered by it, and yet refuses to let pain become hatred. This type appears most purely in Prince Mishkin from The Idiot and in Alyosha from the brothers Karamazov. Not weak men, not fools, men who remain open-hearted in a brutal world. And that may be the rarest form of strength. Here is the line that ties it all together. The soul is healed by being with children. At first glance, it sounds sentimental. It isn't. Dostoevsky is pointing toward innocence, not childish ignorance, but unguarded presence. The ability to meet life before cynicism hardens it. to be with what is real, immediate, vulnerable, to love without turning love into strategy, and maybe that's the final revelation. Human nature is not one thing, it is a battlefield of tendencies. In you, there is an underground man nursing injury, a conformist tempted by comfort, a proud idealist seduced by superiority, a sensualist hungry for escape, and if you have not completely buried it, a compassionate self still capable of wonder. So which one are you? The honest answer is, whichever one you feed. That is why Dostoevsky still matters in modern philosophy and why his work belongs beside discussions of self-improvement, wisdom, and even modern Stoicism. Because he does not flatter you with the idea that you are already coherent. He shows you that freedom is terrifying precisely because you are divided. You can descend, you can harden, you can numb yourself, but you can also become more human. And that more human path does not begin with perfection. It begins with brutal honesty. Where have you made an identity out of pain? Where have you accepted numbness as normal? Where do you love ideas more than people? Where do you use pleasure to avoid silence? And where, despite everything, is your capacity for compassion still alive? Go back to the man from the opening, the one awake at 3 in the morning, trapped in an argument with the past. The real danger was never just the memory. The danger was the type of person that memory was slowly training him to become. That is the challenge Dostoevsky leaves with you. Not how do I feel better, not even how do I succeed, but what kind of soul am I becoming through the way I suffer, desire, think, and love. The next 7 days, try this. At the end of each night, ask yourself 5 questions. Where was I resentful? Where was I numb? Where was I proud? Where did I chase escape? And where was I genuinely compassionate? Write 1 sentence for each. No performance, no self-deception, just evidence. This is not a productivity trick. It is a confrontation, and if you do it honestly, you will start to see your dominant type emerge. More importantly, you'll see the moments where another type could have been chosen. Because that's the deepest life lesson here. Character is not built in grand declarations. It is built in repeated consent. Every day you agree to become someone, the resentful self, the numb self, the superior self, the addicted self, or the compassionate self. Most people will spend their entire lives avoiding this truth. Will you? Drop your interpretation in the comments. Which of the 5 types do you see most clearly in yourself, and which one are you trying to outgrow? The best answers always come from this community. If this shifted something in your thinking, subscribe. We go deeper every week. The person you are becoming is watching every choice you make.